Thanks for the opportunity to come and speak with you guys today. I'm excited to be able to share a little bit about a passion and love of mine. I have been in the Burn Center for 27 years, and I have been in the University of Utah Hospital for 33. Thanks to my mom, that many of you know. 33 years ago, she when I was 15 and a half, 16, she said, "Would you rather work at the hospital or flip burgers?" And I was like, "Definitely the hospital." So thanks to my mom, I got a job in the storeroom, and 3 years later, thanks to my mom once again, she helped me to get a job in the Burn Center through a friend of hers that was the manager at the time. At that point, 27 years ago, I would have never told you that I was going to be the manager of the Burn Center in the future, and that I certainly would have been there 27 years later. For some reason, you find your passion sometimes in life, and I have definitely found my passion. So I hope to be able to share that with you a little bit today. There are so many different directions and things that I could share with you about burn care today, a million different directions to go. I tried to kind of bring together some of the big topics that I think would be most important for community members to have a feeling about and a little bit more understanding about what burn care looks like both to our city, to our state, to our region, and yes, as Steve mentioned, even internationally. So those are all really large topics for us that I hope we can dive into. I also hope that you will leave today with a little bit of burn knowledge about first burns. I think it's my opportunity to share with you kind of what those look like and tell you a little bit about how you can manage those with your families or even at your home regarding some different safety things. So without me taking up a whole lot more time, we'll jump out there and talk a little bit and show you a little bit. For those of you who don't know, the Burn Center is at the University of Utah Hospital. We are the only burn center in the entire Intermountain region. So we cover a 5-state, 6-state referral area all day, every day, and throughout 365 days. Closest burn center to here is Denver, Vegas, Portland, Seattle, and then Sacramento. And then Southern California has many, just based off of population mainly. Population density really drives the need for burn centers. A lot of, like inner city, New York City has 18 burn centers as an example. Some of them, only a couple of them are more premier, kind of higher level burn centers like we are. And I'll tell you a little bit about what that looks like as well and why that's such an important thing to our region. We are the only adult and pediatric center throughout all of that area as well. So there's no burn center at Primary Children's or any other institution in this valley or in this state or through that region. So pretty important for us. This is a picture of an intensive care room in the burn center, nothing too exciting, but a couple of things I want to share with you also about the burn center is it's very unique in nature. If you walk into a hospital, most of the time, for those of you who've seen it inside of a hospital or a unit wherever you've been, there's pretty much just a nurse's station and some rooms around it or rooms in an area. We actually have a lot of different areas that make up the burn center. We have our own operating room. We have our own outpatient care center where we see people after their burn injuries into the ICU and we discharge them back through the out. Sometimes we see people, maybe you touch the oven today and you burn your hand and you're not sure how to manage it and you need us to manage that on the outpatient basis. We also have something called burn therapy, which is made up of occupational and physical therapists to help serve that, and that's located in the burn center as well. We also have our community outreach team and wound care center, and all of those areas make up a pretty significant area within the hospital. We have about 120 people that are work in the burn center, which is a pretty large size group and a very what we call multidisciplinary, kind of a fancy word within the medical community, or interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary. Really it means that it's a team made up of physicians, residents, interns, because we're obviously at a school of medicine, so we see a lot of what we consider house officers, people that are learning how to be doctors. Care assistants, we have people that manage the desk, the physical therapists, a long list, and we go down it. I always want to put this slide up there. One of the things that I try to highlight as a nurse a lot. That's all right. As a nurse, highlight that my nursing staff is ultimately responsible for advocating for the patient with all of these groups. So I try to empower our nursing staff to be very driven towards advancement of their patient, really going into each room every day to make a huge impact in the care that they provide. This is a quick slide of our outpatient center, nothing that doesn't look too crazy different than a hospital. We have a main check-in desk for that, and we have a 5-room clinic. We talked briefly about the wound care center. So the picture on your left is actually a procedure room where patients actually come to have their wounds managed. It's a room where people probably experience a lot of pain. It's not kind of the harder side about burn care is just the emotional toll that it takes both on the patient and on the staff that work in the burn center. That metal table that you see covered with plastic is called a shower table system, where someone lays on it and we take down their dressings that they're wrapped in and we wash their bodies with soap and water and we clean their wounds and then we wrap them back up. The operating room is on your right, and that's a place where we do what's called skin grafting. So when you have a very deep third-degree injury, you have to have a skin graft, and I'll show you a little bit more about what that looks like a little bit later on in a second here also. I have a couple of pictures, so I hope not to make you very scared or intimidated by showing you a few wound pictures, and I don't know why that one's not loading. I've got this presentation on the through the internet this morning, so if a picture doesn't load, I apologize. But this is our physical therapy room, and you can see it's a pretty large room where patients come to do physical therapy. When you suffer a burn injury, you have to keep good active range of motion. And the way you can think about why that's so important is if you were to burn have you ever sunburned your face? Your face felt tight and your lips were tight. So now imagine that you burn through all the layers of the skin. It becomes you lose the elasticity and you can't move. So physical therapy starts on the day one of admission, how we position someone in bed, as well as how we keep them well throughout their duration of their aftercare. Scarring takes about 2 years for a scar to mature. So during that time period, you have to continue to do a lot of physical therapy. If you were burned in your armpit, you would not be able to raise it over your head very easily, okay? Because it would want to contract and bring it down and make it so you couldn't move it very well. So physical therapy ultimately becomes one of the most complicated, long pieces of the puzzle for our burn patients once they're in the hospital. I wanted to teach you a little bit about the demographics of our center and tell you a little bit about what type of patients we care for and what they kind of cover throughout our region. We admit about 350 patients to 400 patients a year on the intensive care unit side. Of those, about 70% of all those patients actually have burns, and non-burns make up about 30%. People are always like, what's a non-burn? Why would a burn center take care of other types of things? When you have a burn, you're damaging the largest organ of your body, your skin. And a lot of people don't look at your skin as being the largest organ. A lot of people, if you ask them that question, they're like, my largest organ's my liver, or my heart, or my brain. But really, at the end of the day, the skin is such an important piece that we take care of. So if you damage it, it really does have long-term implications for you over your duration of your stay. So non-burns actually fall into a category of soft tissue injuries, what we call them. Someone that might have a skin ulcer. Sometimes on the news, you might hear the news refer to an infection that someone might have called the flesh-eating bacteria. It's really the fancy medical word for it is called necrotizing fasciitis, or the more simple for you would be soft tissue injury. Anywhere where you have damage to your skin and your tissues that need some type of surgical intervention and wound care. We are incredibly talented at getting a wound to close, as you might guess. If someone burns the majority of their body, we have to figure out how to get it all healed. And that can be very overwhelming for the patient as well as for the team for months and months and months of care. So soft tissue injury or non-burns make up about 30% of that. And we also have a population in Utah that other people don't have, and that's the care of frostbite. So we see a huge amount of frostbite, both from a recreational perspective as well as from a transient or homeless population here in Utah. So anytime it's when winter starts to roll in and you have one of those kind of rain mixed snow, one of those really wet, heavy snows, that's usually a warning sign to us that within the next 2 weeks we're going to be seeing some pretty significant frostbite, because people will be soaked, then it freezes, and then they don't ever warm up from that, and they don't have a lot of options of that. About 33% of all of those patients are children under the age of 18. So again, remember, primaries does not have a primary or a children unit for burn patients. We see about 42% of all those patients are from out-of-state referrals, and we see about 5,000 clinic visits every year in our outpatient clinic. And again, that might be somebody that you burned your hand on the stove this morning and you need to figure out where you're going to get that cared for. A lot of people go to their primary care physician for something like that, or to their local emergency department, and then that'll be immediately referred to the burn center. Again, we talked about the outpatient visits, and that continues to grow and change. And then about 71% of all of our patients are male. So men are stupid. Men are stupid. Really, and it's kind of funny that kind of matches statistics across the entire United States, actually. In Utah, we have a little bit higher percentage than that. The workforce in Utah that seems to be more risk-taking behaviors is a higher percentage male in Utah. So it's usually about 75-25, honestly, for us. So yeah, men are typically in more risky behaviors.
National research say why?
Mainly because the types of injuries that we see, our most common type of patient is a 20 to 40-year-old male industrial worker. If you look at our region particularly, if you go out to Wendover, you can see little factories out in the desert. You drive across Wyoming, and you usually say to yourself, I wonder what they do there. That's where people get burned. We see a lot of industry. If you think about within our own just valley, you have Rio Tinto with Kennecott Copper in that area with the copper mine. There's a lot of, they have to melt a lot there. So a lot of people don't realize the amount of damage that can come from that, and you don't see that kind of stuff on the news. You see home explosions and you see catastrophic plane crashes and things like that where we might get patients or something that makes national news. But we admit a lot of those 400 patients a year, you probably don't know anything but 5 of them that you see on the news. So it really does make up a huge deal. This is our coverage area for our burn center as a regional burn center. Each of the stars represents where a flight team might bring us a patient. Our home team here is AirMed, and I'll show you a picture of a helicopter in just a second because that's always a good one to show. But each of the black dots shows you where we received at least one burn in one particular year, just to kind of give you an idea across our region of all the different areas we see patients from. That furthest up dot in Montana is basically 1,200 miles away, so we cover a huge area of coverage, and you can get burned on the Canadian border of Montana today in a small town and most likely end up in the University of Utah Burn Center. Other support services for our center include a lot of holistic regional approach to care. I would hope that you'll leave today understanding that burn care very much is what's considered holistic. We try to go out and teach people how to not get burned. We teach EMS how to take care of a burn if they have it so that they can bring it to us and get the patient to us safely. And then while they're with us, we do a lot of intensive care. And then when we discharge them through the outpatient process, we teach them about recovery and hope that they'll actually offer recovery and advice back to patients in the future. So it's a very holistic model of healthcare that's very unique to burn care. So something to consider. One of the other things that we highlight a lot, and some of you may be aware of it or not, is we actually do we have kind of a worldwide connection here. With the LDS Church having so many different LDS missionaries out throughout the entire community and throughout the world, we unfortunately, when they are injured, we do see that happen. The most common one that people are familiar with is the Brussels airport explosion. This is a picture of the airport, and there were 3 missionaries that were burned pretty significantly in this explosion, and they were transferred here to the University of Utah Burn Center for their aftercare. They were initially managed within the first week of their injury in Brussels at the burn center there, and then immediately came to us. So we see this time and time again in a lot of different situations and a lot of things that again don't make it to the news for your public knowledge, but we do see quite a few injuries on a worldwide basis. We get asked all the time to manage different third world country types of injuries as well. Someone will go on a medical mission somewhere from like the University of Utah, and they'll see a patient somewhere that needs to have some type of advanced burn care, and will ask us to try to offer assistance to that. And sometimes we see transfers, people that will show up, they'll be like, well, it may take us 2 months to get a visa to get this person to you, but will you be interested in helping us to manage that? So there are some other burn programs on an international level called the Shriners Institute or Shriners Hospital. So the Shriners group does a lot of charity work that way on an international level as well. But the burn communities across the United States and Canada do a significant amount of what you consider care for underprivileged people. This is a picture of AirMed that was up there for just a second. I don't know why my pictures are not, there we go. They just don't want to load. So this is the new helicopter up at the hospital. If you see it flying around, I always like to make a pitch that people confuse who AirMed and Life Flight is, since we're all at the University of Utah, go Utes. And AirMed is the service for the University of Utah. Life Flight is the service for IHC. So there is a difference in the helicopters that you see flying overhead. And be proud of our AirMed. We have one of the largest systems throughout the whole region. We now have helicopters stationed and planes stationed from the airport out through Tooele all the way to Rock Springs as well as south. And those areas continue to grow. So we really are quite regional in our coverage and really do a great job of that. A lot of times people ask me what our state breakdown is from that whole region, and so I thought it might be important for you to kind of see where different states break down for us. Utah obviously being the largest referral area for burn center.
But from an out-of-state perspective, Idaho makes up about 20% of all the patients that we see, and you can see up there on the slide it says burn and non-burn. So almost 61 patients total came from Idaho in that time period. You can see Montana, Wyoming, Nevada, Oregon, Colorado, North Dakota, and other could be an international, but we just didn't list that out for you.
Is that a year data?
What's that?
Is that a year data?
Yep, that's a year's data.
Yeah.
Yep, that would be 2017's data. So one of the other things that makes our region very unique and makes our burn center very unique is for the last 20 years we have been a leader in telehealth. And you may start to see this be a little bit more common in healthcare, but it would actually make it possible, and maybe some of you have taken advantage of this, where you can sit in your own home on your iPad and actually talk to a physician and see them and have a consultation visit with a physician. That's a really nice feature for people who maybe don't have the ability to travel well, who don't have the means to have to drive across multiple states, things like that. So we actually were very active, again, 20 years ago, before I even heard the comment of telemedicine, where we actually gave video machines with a federal grant to different burn center or different emergency departments in Idaho and Montana, and we would consult with them on a regular basis. So they had a patient in an emergency room, would actually see video conferencing of the patient laying on a gurney in an emergency room in Bozeman, Montana, and evaluate whether or not we needed to transfer them down to the University of Utah Hospital. The reason to do something like that is a lot of people do not have the expertise of burn care. So they may have a very simple injury that they think needs to travel multiple states to see us. They will spend $30,000 on a medical flight to get flown to Utah, and we'll give them a tube of ointment and say, nope, you're gonna be okay, you can go home tomorrow. That doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Mm-hmm. So doing telemedicine is a really nice way that we can cut down on a lot of costs for healthcare, as well as be able to cut down on inadequate transport for a patient.
We really use it actively. We have changed our opinion of how to use it over the last 20 years as well. So we used to see patients in emergency rooms now. Now I get a digital image of them that someone might take on their phone that's HIPAA protected and goes through a site that keeps it safe and secure. And now I do video conferencing for my clinic visits. So we've taken it from out at the main nursing station where I want to see someone in an emergency room, and now we've gotten rid of that video component, and we use the video component in our clinic in an outpatient setting where we actually do almost 50 visits a month for telemedicine. So if you look at that area of coverage, you can see why we need to be able to have different areas for us. And using that technology is pretty awesome. And I actually find most patients actually prefer it. When you go to see the doctor and they seem like they're in a big hurry, like they just are like, they know they have 10 more patients after they see you. When you're in telemedicine and the physician's on a camera, it's kind of funny, it kind of paralyzes them. It kind of leaves them focused and watching you. And so whenever the camera's on them, like you're very much more cognizant of your interactions, you're making sure you're very verbal, you're having a good chat. So a lot of patients find it to be a huge reward. This is the makeup of how patients are actually injured that are treated in our burn center. This is over a 1-year period as well. About 61% of people are injured by flame or fire. The red makes up scald injury and hot water, and that's definitely a risk for the population that's in this room right now. We'll talk a little bit more about hot water safety in just a little bit. We see about 7% made up of contact injury. Chemical burns make up about 3%. Electrical burns make up about 3% as well. And then down to sunburns, about 1% of the population we see. Lots of people get a sunburn and never come to see us, but a lot of people actually, the people that 1% usually have like a full body sunburn that didn't have any sunburn or didn't have any sunscreen on and maybe fell asleep after a lot of alcohol and passed out for 3 or 4 hours in the sun. So you never know what that looks like, and they might probably just need some IV fluid and what that looks like. A lot of people are also surprised. They think that a burn center might take care of lots of people who have really large catastrophic size burn injuries. And that's actually not the truth. So I brought this slide to show you a little bit about the types of size of burn percentage of someone's body. Your arm is 9% of your total body surface area. Your leg is 18, each leg, your torso is 18. So when you look across these bottom numbers there, where it says TBSA stands for total body surface area injured. And you can see that in the one particular year, I
had 6 patients over 60% of their body burned. Most of the patients I took care of actually had underneath a 20% burn of their body. So that's kind of our bread and butter of what we do every day in the burn center. We take care of people who have accidents, always usually accident in nature, small injuries, they might need skin grafting, they might need just basic wound care, and our hope is to be able to discharge them within a short amount of time and have them follow up in the outpatient care center. But again, that's 6 patients that on there that needed large catastrophic time in the hospital. For every one of these percentages here is about a day to a day and a half in the hospital. So if you have a 60% burn, you're going to bank on about 75 days in the hospital. So very expensive care, as you might guess. Anyone want to take a guess at what my room cost is per day? We'll talk about healthcare politics for a second.
1,000 plus.
1,000? Keep going.
No, 15,000.
Not 15, so it's actually around 5,000. So about $5,100 is just the room rate for an ICU bed. I'm the most expensive room in the entire University of Utah hospital. Why might I have higher costs than everybody else? What's that?
Sterile.
No, it doesn't have anything to do with the sterile. It has to do with the amount of something I might use. Staff as well as dressing supplies. So it takes a lot of dressings. We have a unique environment where we have to use a lot of supplies. So the operating room is the #1 supply user in the hospital, and the burn center is #2 for supply use. So it really pays off to have had those 3 years as a teenager in supply stuff. So if I take that back to my 16 and 19-year-old, people are always like, how do you know so much about stores and stuff? Well, because I work there. So it makes a big difference that way. These are the types of ways that people do get injured, like we talked about. So flames, explosions, house fires, leaning over a candle, fireworks, playing with matches and gasoline for children or for adults. You see a lot of people do some dumb things sometimes. A lot of flammable liquids. We see a lot of scald injuries, so hot water, coffee, soup, spray of hot water. We see a lot of children that are burned in bathtub scalds, which are pretty common. If you have young children at home, we'll talk a little bit more, but I have some bathtub dunkers, so if you have grandkids that you'd like to give some things to, I have some little cards here that tell them whether or not the water is safe to get in, so a nice little safety component. You can see a lot of contact injuries. One of the most common in Utah is coming up into the season of glass front fireplaces. If you have a glass front fireplace in your home and you have toddlers, please turn it off. Don't be about 350 to 400 degrees, the glass. So if you have a toddler that's running around your house, or if you have children that have children, that have little kids that are toddling, please educate them to turn off the glass front fireplace. It's one of the biggest risks in the house. Kids don't know how to pull off of it, and their hands actually stick to it, and they have usually a very catastrophic, deep third-degree injury when they have those things happen. So something for you to think about. From both household cleaners as well as lots of different types of things that are listed there, and electrical injuries as well, including lightning. A lot of people don't know that Utah is one of the highest lightning strikes in the entire United States. Florida's #1, Utah's in the top 5 for lightning strikes. Our elevation, there's lightning strikes in the Uintas every year, as well as throughout the Southwest, across Canyonlands area quite often. One of the things I want to transition to is talking a little bit about how hard it is for your body to overcome a burn injury. We talked about that you're burning the biggest organ of your body. The risks that come with that are a huge impact to your respiratory component, to your heart and your circulation, to your neurological components, to your integumentary, which is your skin, to your digestive even, and how you digest food, and you need to be able to excrete all of those things, both in the urinary system and the GU system. So pretty complicated, and I want to jump in to kind of teach you guys a little bit about some basic anatomy and burn care. But this is a cross-section of your skin that each of us has. And the very top layer there is called your epidermis, and the middle section, it's kind of the tan, is called your dermis, and then down below is your subcutaneous tissue, okay? So one of the things that happens in burn care is to break down where first, second, and third degree burn are on this slide. And that tells us a lot in burn care. This slide honestly helps me all day long to try to determine how a patient's going to recover from the burn injury. So if you have a burn injury on the top surface there, that's considered a sunburn. You damaged your epidermis, it hurts, you're frustrated, you're in a little bit of pain. Maybe you take an ibuprofen, you drink a lot of water, you feel that crap for a day or so, or you drink a beer and you go to sleep and you feel better the next day. Whatever that might be for you with a sunburn, it still is a pretty big deal, so we recommend a lot of sunscreen for that. But if it gets down into the dermis layer, that's considered a secondary burn. You see a lot of fluid-filled blisters, a lot of treatment that way. And if you get a third-degree burn, that's all the way down through all the layers of your tissue, all the way down to subcutaneous tissue. So it's a big thing that we try to teach people and have an understanding of. You get fluid-filled blisters, you see large blisters a lot when it's in the dermal layer for a secondary burn because your capillaries are leaking. Okay, so it's just kind of a process that happens. You get a lot of fluid to your body. If you've twisted an ankle before, that kind of is your body's inflammatory response to making your ankle swell. Exact same thing happens with a burn. If you get burned in an area, you have an inflammatory response that wants to make it swell. You get a lot of fluid in that area. The fluid builds up underneath the tissue if it hasn't been torn and makes you have a large fluid-filled blister. I'm going to show you a couple of quick slides with a little bit of conversation. This is one of my nurses who sunburned the crap out of the top of his head, as you can see. And this would be an example. He's hiking through the Uintas and he doesn't have sunscreen on and he fried the top of his head. And I'm guilty of doing the same and something to consider. So they usually heal very spontaneous. We don't consider this as counted in the percentage of how big someone's burn injury is as well. So it's just something that's going to heal and take care of itself. A little bit more complicated for us is unfortunately a secondary burn. I'm not going to get much more with any more gruesome pictures, so don't worry too much. But I show these to you because this is actually a child that was being held while the mom was cooking, and the child simply put their hand straight into the grease. Happens every day, everywhere. And if you think about your time when maybe you had kids when they were little, you hold your kids everywhere you're going, you're doing as much as you can, you think you're keeping them safe so you don't step them on the floor, and you pick it up and you're holding them while you cook. Okay? My kids don't cook well to this day. My mom can attest to that because I'm so paranoid about getting burned in the kitchen. There was like a line in the kitchen. I was like, get out of the kitchen. In my house, we make an announcement if you're carrying boiling water from the stove to the sink. Like I still do to this day, moving boiling water to make sure nobody's with me or anywhere, because of all the hard times that I see with those things. So this is the same hand. That's a big fluid-filled blister. We take off all that dead tissue to be able to help to be able to see the wound and be able to heal it. And this is the hand on the right, and it went on to heal well. Didn't need surgery and did quite well. But it's still something to be what's considered a partial thickness injury. So if you think about that skin slide, it's halfway through it. Partial thickness of all the thickness of the tissues. After a secondary burn, unfortunately, comes something called a third-degree burn. Well, we have a superficial second. So this is an example of one that also might heal. It's nice and pink and will continue to do well. So very similar in style and type of injury. And then we kind of roll into what's considered a deep secondary burn. And you can kind of see the difference now. They're starting to get very white in appearance, and they look a lot different. Seeking medical care is very important. The hand on the right is a farmer from Roosevelt who was priming the carburetor on his tractor and had a flash burn on him. And he stayed at home for 5 days before getting it taken care of. And then he started vomiting and getting dehydrated and didn't feel well. So if you're one of those stubborn people who doesn't like healthcare, if you have a burn, please don't be. Or pass that on to your friends and colleagues as well. So this is a deep secondary burn, and then we roll forward to what's considered a third-degree burn. This is actually a child that was with a sibling that was sitting around a place where they were playing with gasoline and matches. The gasoline had soaked onto the ground. The child had clothing on, and it absorbed the gas. Someone lit a match, and then it caught the pants on fire of a small child. And you can almost see the difference now. This is what's considered a third-degree burn. It feels very hard. It feels like leather. So if you've ever you run your hand on your leather jacket or something like that, it feels very smooth. And because it's burned through all the layers of the skin, there's no pain. So a lot of times people don't seek treatment in the medical community because they're like, oh, it's fine, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. Pain and burns is actually a really good thing. So if it hurts, that's good. If it doesn't hurt, that's usually indicative that it's a deeper injury and something we need to manage. So, and something that's going to need something called a skin graft procedure. So I threw in a little bit of kind of an understanding so that you guys can get a sense of what a skin graft, if I get my mouse to move forward. The internet has slowed. There we go. This is a machine called a Dermatome, and this is actually how we skin graft people. So people ask me all the time, so how do you remove the skin? How do you take the skin off? I'm not going to show that to you, so don't worry. But I did show you the machine that actually does it. It gets a really sharp blade that goes on there, and the blade moves back and forth on a horizontal plane. And we can measure it on the side to get the depth of the skin that we need to remove. So we take this machine, the surgeon actually, while the patient's asleep in the operating room, uses the same machine to remove the dead burn tissue, and then they use the same machine to actually pull skin off of your body from somewhere else and move it over to the area where you were burned. So we remove the dead tissue, then we take skin from somewhere else healthy on your body, move it over. Typically those places where we move it from are the thighs, the butt, or the back. That's where some of your thickest, best skin is for us, and it works very well for that. There's different types of skin grafting that we'll talk briefly about, but at the end of the day, skin grafting is pretty amazing. You can pick up a piece of your tissue from somewhere on your body and move it to somewhere else and have it work. What about someone else's skin? Could I use someone else's skin on your body? You think? Yeah, so it actually, tissue rejection is very common. So if I can't use it long term, we in the Burn Center do it a little differently, and I'll show you this next slide to kind of give you the different types of breakdown of grafts. Let me get through them. So we can use your skin, which is considered an autograft, taking your skin, self-skin, and moving it to somewhere else, okay? I can take skin from a cadaver and put it on a wound to temporarily trick the body into thinking it's got its own skin. But it rejects it in about 5 days. It sloughs off, and we have to do some more of that procedure. We do that at a time where we feel like someone has a really catastrophic big body injury. We don't want to use their skin on their wound until we know that their body's ready for that. So it's very commonly to see rejection and things like that. So again, autograft is yourself, homograft is from a cadaver, and then the third one down there is something called a xenograft, which is primarily throughout the burn community over the years has been pig skin. And that's what they call it, xenograft, so people aren't thinking they're having pig on them, because as soon as people say, and all the time someone says, oh, you have pig skin, and you'll have patients that try to joke and they'll oink and things like that, but you just, it's something that people are not familiar with, and people that have concerns over animal issues sometimes have an issue with the medical community as well. So it's referred to as xenograft for that reason. There's also some different technologies where if you burn your entire body, I can find a place in your body where you're not burned very much, and I can send it to a lab in Boston, and they grow your epidermis cells in a lab in a petri dish, and then they send that back to me after 3 weeks, and we can put it on a patient. The problem with that is it doesn't include your dermis. It only is your epidermis. So if I was to hold up a piece, I can see right through it. We can see each other. It's that thin. And if I hold my skin up to the light here and I go like this, my epithelial cells fly all over the place, right? You can see the kind of flaking off. Those are your dead epithelial cells. That's what makes the ring around the bathtub is your epithelial cells. So when you have those types of things, we have to be really cautious with what our treatment options. And if we send it off to a lab in Boston, it's $1,250 for each 2x2 piece of epidermis. Medical costs, right? You got to make your money somewhere, right? So that's a whole other conversation. That's a whole other lunch. That's a whole other lunch and learn, right?
Are we actually insured against that as well?
Well, so a lot of people's insurance will pay for those types of things. Burn care is a pretty unique one that goes across a lot of lines for healthcare. Medicaid, Medicare does end up paying for a lot of different costs of those things, but burn care is really expensive. It's not unheard of for someone with a large injury to have $1 million hospital stay.
But it's not that you have to choose to add it to your...
You do not have to choose to add it to your plan, no. If you have a really specific insurance, you might want to ask them, but the risk of any of you getting burned is pretty low on a catastrophic injury. So I mean, it's from a percentage of time, I don't want you to leave today concerned that you need to have that all coverage. But it's just that's why you carry insurance, and those types of things are definitely overwhelming for sure. So how much time do I have? I want to talk. 25 till, so I got 25 minutes, perfect. I showed you a quick picture here of what a skin graft might look like so that you understand how an injury might look after we in the surgical area. This is someone who had a third-degree burn on their hand. We took off all of their skin as this is their skin being moved onto their body. The reason I threw this kind of hard to look at picture in there is so that you can see the other side of it. So this is about 8 weeks later. Okay, so we have a lot of great outcomes. You can do a lot of amazing things with moving tissue, and I really find it to be something it still just boggles my mind, honestly, after doing it for 27 years, the things that we're able to do with the body. If a body's fairly healthy, a body has good circulation, it has good care, and you take care of the wound, and you clean it well, and you do good things for it, most of the time it's going to get better. It does a really great job of wanting to fix itself. So it's just one of those things in the medical community that just really quite surprises me, the difference between these two images. So, initial injury, initial skin grafting, about 3 days out from surgery to 8 weeks out, and it looks really great, I think, in my opinion. I mentioned I was going to talk a little bit about hot water safety, the challenges of hot water safety. As you start to look at your own life, you start to think about what you do in your own home. How many of you know how to turn down your water heater? Have actually ever done it? Okay? The reason I bring that up is that the two communities at risk of having hot water scald are babies, okay? It's young children that actually someone turns on the tap and doesn't realize how they lay the baby in the tub. They turn the hot water on, they don't realize how hot it is, it instantly scalds the child. Or a sibling that might be 3 or 4 picks up the baby from mom and dad thinking they're going to help them, takes the baby to the bathtub, turns on the hot water, same kind of thing. So we always teach everyone within our community classes, number one, if you have a small child at home, please, please, please turn down your water heater. If you go to the minimum setting, which is 124, that'll actually do a really nice job of keeping you pretty safe. The other population that's at risk are people that are over the age of 70, okay? If you have MS, if you have seizure disorder, if you're just not very stable on your feet, and when you're standing in your shower, you're at risk for falling, have someone help you to learn how to turn down your water heater, okay? Turning it down again will help to keep you safe. I can't tell you how many times I've actually taken care of someone that's over the age of 70. The youngest kid I've ever taken care of was 10 days old, oldest person 106. Both of the 10-year-old and the 106, hot water scald. Okay, so please be very cautious with that and think about doing that. Again, I have some little cards up here that allow you to put it underneath the water. So if you have a toddler or a grandchild, you want to take this home, I brought plenty for you to take. So please don't be shy about just taking one. If you have 6 grandkids, please take 6 of them. I don't care. We can get more if you run out. So it's something just to consider from a safety component throughout the community. Remember, water in Utah boils about 206. So 156 on this is when the little dots are in the bottom of your pan. When you're like, hurry up and boil. Most people's water heaters are at 140. Okay. If you're worried about what your temperature is, you can take a candy thermometer for cooking, find the tap that's closest to your water heater, turn it on to hot, let it run for 30 seconds, and put the thermometer underneath there to see how hot your water heater is running. Okay? If you need help with any of these things, if you find yourself pretty useful in the online community, you can find YouTubes about how to turn your hot water heater down. If you don't know how to do that, there are companies that will come out and do those things for you. So just think about that from a safety perspective for me, so we keep everyone safe, because I'd hate to have to take care of any of you. Okay? We just don't care for burns like I talked about earlier. We take care of the frostbite. We take care of the flesh-eating bacteria called necrotizing fasciitis. We take care of a very complicated disease called purpura fulminans. There's something called TEN, which is toxic epithelial necrolysis syndrome, and that is when your body has an allergic reaction to a certain type of sulfur-based drug, and it makes you slough off all of your epithelial cells. We take care of a lot of traumatic degloving injuries. Maybe someone rolls their car and a piece of their body gets outside of their car and rips off some of their skin. We see that in motorcycle accidents, just not road rash, but someone who might catch a piece of skin and it actually, something goes into their skin and then it rips it off. Sounds pretty crazy, and it is hard to take care of. We take care of a couple of other things there. The bottom one, which is the calciophylaxis, is very common in this community. A lot of people know it as what Larry H. Miller had, and that's what he died from. So that's an example of some of the different challenges that people have throughout the community, a different disease process. But we do take care of a lot of different things that impact your body, and a lot of different challenges in that case. So impact of the burn injury is pretty catastrophic in a lot of ways. It both impacts you physically from a scarring perspective and how you feel about yourself and what you look like, as well as your mobility, being able to if you burn your hand, having that skin grafted hand, it may be hard for you to reach out and grab a soda can. Okay? And actually then, let's say you burned your whole arm and your armpit, be able to actually bend it and move it up to you. One of the biggest challenges that a lot of burn patients with large injuries face is the ability for them to take care of themselves and do what we call in the medical community ADLs, which stands for activities of daily living. You take for granted getting up, brushing your teeth, combing your hair, putting on your clothes, take care of those things. Those things do get more challenging as you get older, for sure, but activities of daily living is pretty much what kind of keeps you living your life every day. So a burn patient has a large injury, they have challenges with activities of daily living. The impact to your mental wellness from that is the self-esteem issue of how you look about yourself, and that of what we consider PTSD, which is a pretty common thing people talk about these days, post-traumatic stress disorder. So I decided to kind of follow up that conversation with thinking about who the most famous burn patients are in the world. Besides looking at this slide, can anyone think of anyone that might be more famous in a popular way, not a negative way? Come on, you guys don't watch Dancing with the Stars? He's my Dancing with the Stars people. Nobody? So there was a gentleman that was on there that was a burn survivor. Do you guys remember him? He was actually burned in military duty and went on to be an actor. So he's very popular within the community as far as the burn community goes. But really at the end of the day, if you ask the pauper, if I go out and grab 20 students outside that were walking by and say, tell me who the most famous burn patients are, these are the people that they're going to tell you about. Freddy Krueger, was in horror movies because he was burned and he has to kill people because he was burned. The Phantom of the Opera has to wear a mask because he was burned. Mel Gibson is the man without a face. Wonderful movie, whether you love Mel Gibson's politics or not, which no one does, but wherever you sit out there with your Mel Gibson stuff, one of his most magnificent movies, in my opinion, because he did a wonderful job in this movie of depicting what it's like to live as a burn survivor. School teacher, wife died in a car accident with him, he's burned, he survives, has the loss of his spouse from this situation, then can only go to the market in the small community at night because people are going to see his scars and be afraid of him. That's how the world sometimes looks at catastrophic burn injuries and how we view things. All of that changed in the national burn community here in the United States on this day. 9/11 changed the way that the burn care actually looks. The only people to survive 9/11 on both the Pentagon and the World Trade Center disaster that were in the buildings were all burned. There were 18 survivors total. Okay? They were treated at both the New York Center as well as at the Washington General Hospital in DC. And a lot of survivors came out of that. But one of the things that was really interesting to us in the burn community at that point was this statement in October 1st of 2001 by the Wall Street Journal, that there's no mirrors in the burn center. If you burned your face today, what are you going to do? You're going to look in the mirror. And I think this goes back to my slide a couple slides ago about showing Freddy Krueger, because I think popular culture in the United States, or worldwide, is to judge people for how they look. It's what the magazine covers look different, it's what you see on the news, promotion of sex ads, promotion of whatever your thing might be. I mean, everyone being glamorous, them skinnying up somebody on the cover of the Shape magazine, whatever your thing might be, the way that people feel about how they look, and you look at how much social media has driven that as well, it's a really big deal to our world these days. And so the reason I throw this in there is to talk about the transition, because when we have someone come into our center, we have to figure out how to help them to learn how to be a survivor and not a victim. And this statement is about becoming a victim. Okay? So we try to build upon that. One of the ways that we build upon that is with our summer camp programs, and I wanted to highlight kind of these for a little bit. This is definitely what kept me in the burn center for 27 years. It is my baby, it's my passion, it's my commitment to survivors. My very first year of working in the burn center, I was asked if I wanted to help participate in coordinating building of a program for young survivors. I'd done some stuff in high school with trying to help younger kids learn about space exploration, and I worked at Brighton High School and had a great teacher who inspired us to kind of help youth a lot. And definitely fell in love with the idea of trying to help youth a little bit. Had been in the burn center for about a year and a half. I was like, yeah, that sounds really great. So because of that, we started a 6-day river rafting trip for our 13 to 17-year-olds. And from that experience 27 years ago, 1 year later, I was asked to be in charge of it because they couldn't find anybody else. And I didn't think that it was going to happen. I think 4 or 5 people were asked before I wasn't even a nurse yet, or didn't even want to be a nurse. I decided that why would I want to be a nurse like my mom and my grandma? I was a boy, it's 19, I'm like, forget that. But I fell in love with it, and I really found my niche. But going down this path of the kind of burn camp community, this is why. This is a young survivor who's sitting in his wagon in the burn center with a really catastrophic skull injury. Okay? So looking at this, does he have PTSD? Is he going to have mental challenges? Is he going to be pushed hard? Is he going to be teased in school? Is he going to be made fun of? Is he going to not believe in himself? And we develop programming to give someone an opportunity to feel safe, to feel loved, to feel that they are important, and to make them ultimately learn how to live their life as a survivor. We give them a lot of tools. We've developed that into 5 different programs now. Those 5 different programs are age-based. They're challenge-based based off of age. We start at age 4 and we go all the way through preschool camp. So I mentioned earlier the youngest baby I ever took care of was 10 days old, and the oldest person in the was 106. My youngest person at burn camp is now 4, and the oldest person I've had at adult burn camp was 76. Okay? So we cover the gamut. We're trying to figure out how to give them the tools that they need. We're nonprofit in base. We're volunteer supported. There's no cost to the survivors, so we're out there pushing through the community all the time, looking to be able to provide international or to provide funding. And then we're also recognized, our programs here at the University of Utah have become recognized on an international level as some of the leading burn camps across the United States. Most burn camp programs operate out of foundations or from families that had a loved one who got injured. They don't typically operate out of hospitals. Having a hospital-based burn camp program means that we have a different philosophy on trying to help you. And we involve psychosocial programming so that we give kids and adults tools to learn how to get better from their injuries and to push them to get to a place of recovery. So I'm going to show you a couple of quick pictures here. Preschool camp, I mentioned, is for 4 to 5-year-olds. It's a day camp that's on the last day of our 6 to 12-year-old camp. And really at that point, 4 and 5, what do you have to learn about your burn injury? Just that you have a burn injury and that there's other people like you. And we start teaching them some social skills, which are the same kind of stuff they get out of regular preschool. But definitely something to consider. Here's some of the little kids attending preschool camp with some of our counselors all having fun and doing one of those goofy pictures. And this is at Mill Creek Canyon at Camp Tracy. On that camp, before that preschool camp, we have a 5-day camp that's for our 6 to 12-year-olds, and that's a 5-day, 4-night camp. And it's focused on development of skills to manage the burn injuries, role playing, how to talk to others about your burn injury. We actually stop and teach a kid in a group circle where someone at the grocery store might come up to them and say, frankly, it's amazing. Watch people in the grocery store and be like, oh my God, what happened to you? It's amazing to see how people treat other people for looking different. So we give them the skill set. We actually do something called a rehearsed response. If you're someone in your life that has something where you get tired of people asking you, teach yourself what's called a rehearsed response. Practice it. Say the same thing every time. And we'll teach a kid that's 6 to say something like, oh, thank you for your concern. I suffered a burn injury. I'm doing great now, but thanks. Have a great day. It shuts them down. It makes it so that they feel power. It gives them self-esteem to feel like they can handle those hard moments that happen, because that's the way the world treats them. If you go back to that slide about how the world looks at people. Okay? This program is completely firefighter funded, which is amazing. So we have a really great community of firefighters. Before you get worried that that's your tax dollars, it's not. It's actually union firefighters that actually gather this funding on their own and do a great job of supporting us. So we have a wonderful relationship with our firefighter community. These are some pictures from there. Here's a little boy and girl climbing a rock wall. And there was a little girl with a therapy dog at camp laughing and smiling. And you wouldn't know it by this picture, but she has a skin graft on top of her head and about 30% of her body, and her brother was burned with her and her dad. So all of them have burn injury, but she's at camp, and that's pretty much the smiles we see when kids are at camp having an amazing time. We do our river rafting trip, which I fell in love with, and that's for age 13 to 17-year-olds. It's a 6-day river rafting trip on the Green River through Desolation Canyon, And we really focus on peer support, life goal setting, teenagers. You might guess that a lot of the population of kids that we see that get burned as teenagers don't come from really awesome home situations. They come from really, a lot of times across the nation, lower socioeconomic status people. They don't have a lot of resources. Their counselor might be the first person to ever hold them accountable for anything or have a rule at camp. So sometimes camp's a pretty interesting place for sure. So these are some of the images from here. Here's a young boy that is floating down the Green River on his kayak. Some of the sights and sounds that we get to see. These are some petroglyphs from there. I don't know why the pictures aren't holding, my apologies. And this is a lot of times what nights are like there for us. This is just a quiet group circle where we process and talk about burn injury. What a perfect place to recover. So definitely a really nice place in the Green River. We have a young adult program now that's for 4 days and 3 nights, and that's focused on teaching them how to skills of cooking, job finding, interviewing skills. We actually have them sit down and learn about interviewing, how to find a job. We actually start talking about intimacy relationship. We see that challenge with adult patients who are burned, that they might be afraid to have intimacy again with a partner because they're afraid of what they look like, or they're afraid they might hurt themselves, things like that when they're touching them. So we do also do an etiquette training class because we feel like this population anymore, particularly the teenage group, has no clue what etiquette actually means at a dinner table or anywhere else for that matter. And my mom's thinking to myself, have you taught Lance any etiquette? That's a whole different conversation. So this is an example of someone cooking. You may recognize that girl in the pink shirt. She was actually on the 2 News for a long time, being a noon cook person. So she volunteered her time to come and teach our kids how to do some cooking. And then one that's really become dear to my heart a little bit more is I gave up managing the programs when I became the manager of the Burn Center 5 years ago. It took me a couple years to figure out I couldn't do it all. But I did keep the adult camp program, which is for 21 years of age plus. Have a 6-day camp that goes multiple days where they're actually allowed to bring a significant other or someone that was involved in their injury. We talk about the life challenges, and we talk about kind of learning skills to live through it, relationship building, a lot of peer support. We do a lot of yoga on that trip. Here's a couple of favorite couple of mine holding hands down the river. It's a little bit more extreme than the kids' trip. I don't know why I'm trying to get those pictures to hold. Once they load, they seem to, I don't know why it's doing that, but that's the technology. Sometimes you can rely on the internet, sometimes you can't. There you go. So I actually took this picture. It was a crazy day, and it was really fun to be able to be down the river. So whole different experience for the adult trip. We don't take the kids through this section of whitewater, just the liability, but I can get an adult to sign off on having a lot of fun. So this is just some of what it looks like down there. So this is right before, if you've ever been to Dead Horse Point, this is right before Dead Horse Point down on the Colorado River. So it's a total different scene from the river than it is from up above. Here's one of our survivors that suffered an electrical injury, that lost both of his arms. And here he is at Burn Camp playing Frisbee. I told you briefly, or Steve mentioned earlier, I want to talk a little bit about the international thing, and I'll start wrapping up because I'm probably almost out of time because I love to talk about burn care. It's my passion. About 8 years ago, I opened my door to my office, my phone was ringing, I grabbed it really quick, and it was a physician that I knew from the labor and delivery department that delivers babies, and he's like, Brad, it's Dr. Draper. I'm like, what's up? He's like, I'm in China, and I'm here doing a mission with the Chinese group. They actually asked us to come here and help them to figure out how to give them birthing kits that would allow them to not have so much death with infection after. So he was out in the Tibetan Plateau in China doing this, and he said, the hospital here would very much like to have burn training. Are you interested? And I was like, well, maybe. When is it? He's like, well, it's in 2 months, and it's completely expense paid by the Chinese government, and I'd love for you to come. 2 months was a little quick, but we actually put them off for a year, and we went the next year. The reason I'm highlighting this is I actually went to the town of Jing, which is straight, the red dot right between the I and the N, right above it where it says Jing, Xining. Went smack to the middle of China. Most amazing experience from my life so far, I have to say. I didn't bring you tons of pictures because I didn't want to bore you with all my pictures, but in my 27 years, people might say to me, what was your most profound moment in burn care? It was not here at the University of Utah, and it was not at Burn Camp. It was this moment where I was asked to help with a small child that had a really large burn injury. And they came to us and they said, this little boy seems like he's getting really sick, he's getting pneumonia, we think he might die. Do you have any ideas for how we can help to care for him? This is one of my good friends on the right there that was the director of our burn center, Jeff Saffel, for a lot of years. We were there together. And we looked at his x-ray and we started involving her. So this is on the first day of us being in China. Okay? And what we found is that they don't do mobility. If you had pneumonia right now, I'd tell you the best thing you could do for yourself would be to get up out of bed and walk. You may cough and hack and feel like crap, but it's the best thing you can do is keep good blood flow, keep your lungs regulated. They had this little boy on bed rest. They didn't understand the connection in healthcare of actually getting someone up and moving them, particularly in burn care. He had been in bed for 3 weeks with a 40% burn, not a very deep injury that needed skin grafting, but a pretty deep injury nonetheless that was going to take some time to heal, and they hadn't moved him. So the first thing that we did was we said, well, we're going to walk him. And they said, no, you can't walk him, you can't do that. We said, watch us. So this was right after we did his dressing change. Everyone's thinking, how can this kid possibly walk? And this is about 3 minutes later. See if I can get it to load. This is 3 minutes later. Oops, I ruined it because it went forward. So this is 3 minutes later for me, and this is me walking this little boy. I apologize for the no coverage, but they don't have diapers. Okay. So this is 3 minutes later. 5 days later, this little boy was running up and down the hallway, laughing, didn't have pneumonia, was feeling great, his wounds were looking better. And then, to my delight, on Christmas Day, a few years later, about 2 years later, I got a set of pictures. And this was them in the Chinese burn unit there. And this was the nurses celebrating his 1 year anniversary on the left. This is him at his 2 year anniversary, and this is him at his 3 year anniversary. I'll work hard not to cry. But this was my most profound moment don't take for granted our healthcare system. A lot of people need health. Change your mind about what it looks like on an international level. I can tell you, as a naive American, I felt like I went to China expecting to see military everywhere, to see people who weren't very interested in having me there, to find people that were not very engaging with our interest. And it was the exact opposite. Never really saw a military person except in Beijing when I was at Tiananmen Square. Funny enough, everywhere else there was not a military person in sight. Very delightful people who were interested only in having us to teach them how to get better. And that was a pleasure to do. So international outreach continues to be a very large passion of mine, and it's something that I want to continue to try to do when I'm done with my career here at the University of Utah. And I think it's just an important piece of what we can do. The knowledge that we each have about how we can change people, other places, is pretty special. And I think it's something that should be harnessed and considered well into the future. I wanted to transition really quickly to showing a couple of pictures of my mom and I and my dad. So it would be, sorry, I keep bouncing around here, the darn internet today. Anyway, no, it won't hold, will it? Anyway, so there's a picture of my mom and I with the Eiffel Tower. We had my dad's life celebration after he passed away from colon cancer in this building, so I wanted to make sure that we talked a little bit. I haven't been back in here since then, but amazing moment and amazing man who I owe a lot to, but ultimately my mom is a nurse and she's been a passion of mine, and she is responsible, although she won't take credit for it, to getting my interest in healthcare kicked off a little differently. That and her mother inspired me to be the nurse I am today, and I can't thank you enough for that, Mom, so thank you very much. And I don't know why those pictures won't stay. That's my, I'm going to make this work. Yeah, so anyway, there's my family quickly, and then of course the picture at the end with our trip to Paris that we all had together, which was awesome. So this was actually in Giverny, in a small, we were standing right outside of Monet's garden, and we were having a great time that day. And we good memories from our trip there. So definitely get out there and travel and have a great time, and feel good about what we do. If any of you are on social media, you're on Facebook or anything like that, we do have a Burn Center Facebook page. Please consider following that. And if anybody in here on Twitter, any Twitter people? I didn't think so. But Twitter's a really great it's a really great technology for sharing a lot of information. So we also have a very active social media campaign for our Burn Center. So thank you very much for the time today. I'd like to open it up for any questions that I can answer. Hi, sir.
Can you say anything about dealing with internal burns?
Yeah. So the only type of internal burn injuries that I see are with electrical injuries. So electrical current will travel through the surface of your skin and it can burn you internally. It can burn your muscles, it can burn your organs. Those are very catastrophic injuries, and they usually sometimes end up leading to amputations and sometimes death. Besides having anything internal more than that, you might see someone who takes a chemical like Drano, a child that might drink Drano, and they'll burn their esophagus. We don't really treat that in the burn center necessarily. We might treat like an exposure to their mouth and things like that, but a GI doctor's going to have to manage the burns down the intestinal tract. So is that kind of what you were getting at?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hot soup or hot coffee or hot.
So your body does a really great job of cooling things. So when you breathe in hot gas, if this place was on fire and you're unconscious, you're breathing, it actually cools it. Most people who get lung injury aren't burned. They're actually, their oral pharynx cools it well enough. They actually have chemical burn in their lung tissue versus having it burned by heat. So you can burn the inside of your mouth, but burning down further like that's pretty complicated. So even when we say that people have an internal lung injury or they have an inhalation injury, like we like to call it, it's usually not heat related, it's smoke related from all the chemicals. Yeah. What other kind of questions can I answer for you? Yeah, hi sir.
You said 71% of the burn victims are male, 33% are kids.
33% are women.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So that slide was referrals of 400 women a year.
Okay.
33% are kids. Of our total number, 70% are male, other 30% being female.
So, the kids, high percentage of male kids have burns too, right?
Yes, little boys get burned a lot more than little girls. And how many of you played with gas and fire in it?
Fireworks.
Okay.
Yeah. My dad I don't tell this story very much because my mom's in the audience. But I played with gas in my house. Yeah, I was lucky. And she would have told me, I'm gonna kill you. And did she tell me not to play with it? Of course. And was she an amazing mother? Of course. Did she know what I was doing? No. No, but it was fun. And I was just lucky. But I see little kids all the time. YouTube's a huge issue for us with that, actually, with young kids now. You will see people that I've taken care of a young boy who wanted to see flames shoot off the back of his skateboard. So he stood on the skateboard and they poured gasoline on the skateboard and he had his friend light it. Because on the shows or on TV or in a movie, they do it so that you can see those kind of things. But you just never know what it might be. So my rule of thumb is if you have teenagers or you know teenagers, grandkids, things like that, have someone lock the gasoline up. Don't allow them access to fireworks when you're not home, things like that. I figured out where my dad hid a lot of rockets. It's all right. Sorry, Mom. But I'm here and I'm fine.
You survived.
I survived it, and you survived as well, right? Maybe.
I did.
Yeah.
And that may be why your mom has gray hair.
I'm her only child, and I'm definitely responsible for that. There's no doubt about that. Other questions about burn care? Again, I skimmed the surface today for you. I wanted you to have a little bit of an understanding of kind of the things that we see and what we deal with. I didn't dive into the really nitty-gritty medical side of it. There are a million different directions to go, but in closing, let me just say, burn care is really complicated. It is very catastrophic to those that are impacted by it. You have a world-renowned burn center here at the University of Utah that is what's called verified by the American Burn Association and the American College of Surgeons as a leader in burn care, across the nation. So our center is well recognized on the national front for burn care, and I'm biased because it's where I've worked my entire career, but we're definitely a top 5 burn center in the United States for the type of care that we have to offer. Yes, sir.
Does the military have its own burn care?
They absolutely do. I love that question. There are burn centers all over the world. The ones in Europe and the ones in the United States and Australia are the most renowned for the type of care that they deliver. The burn center in Texas at Brooks Army Hospital, or what's also referred to as sometimes the Institute of Burn, is our surgical burn management, is the largest military center, and they can get someone that's burned in Afghanistan from the field there, and they go from the field to Germany to Ramstein, and then from Ramstein to Texas, and they can get you there in 24 hours. They actually have a mobile ICU hospital on a plane. They have about 5 ICU rooms in the back of a C5, and they transfer them whenever they need to do that. We do not have a VA here that has a burn center, so we do take care of an occasional person that was maybe from Utah, injured in the field, treated at Brooke Army Hospital, and then transferred back to Utah. We'll see some care that way. But most of the time they stay in the VA system. But yeah, we're probably most aggressive, where the most amount of research is under the Army's kind of piece of that. We get a lot of research dollars from the Department of Defense, which, depending on where you sit politic-wise and all those, but the Department of Defense does give burn research a lot of money, which is a positive to us on that side. So we used to see a lot of that. Yeah.
Hi, before you get to the hospital, you have a kid or whoever it is and they get burned with cold water.
Really great question. I meant to do a full first aid thing at the top, and I'm glad you said that because I forgot to put the slide in at the end now that you said that. So, no, so the number one treatment if you touch the oven is to put your finger underneath the water, right? Nothing wrong with that, you're just fine. If you have a larger injury though, and you cover someone in water, cold water, they get hypothermic. It can actually impede their ability to heal from their injuries. It can actually make them so hypothermic that their heart stops.
Oh.
So, small injury, put it underneath there if you can. It makes it feel better. But what happens as soon as you pull it out? And then what happens? It throbs, right? So when you put it under the cold water, the best treatment for a burn is circulation. If you have good circulation, when you put it into the cold water, what happens to your circulation? And then you take it out, and then it throbs. It's throbbing because the circulation's returning. Then you put it back, and it feels great. Then you take it out, and you keep doing this trick all day. So cold water or ice are not recommended. I also, if you have wives' tales out there, that your grandma or grandma tales that are out there, to put butter on there, to put milk on them, to all those sorts of things, please don't do that. The best treatment is to stop the burning process. If that's with some cool water or something, great. Okay. Then take it out. Take some ibuprofen. Cover it with, with an ointment like Neosporin. Change it twice a day. and take great care of it. If you keep it, if you change it twice a day and you use it. If you burned your finger, I would want you doing this. Every commercial break while you're watching TV, bend your finger. If you burn your foot, get up and walk on it. Because and the problem is, if someone gets up to walk on their foot, they're like, oh, it's throbbing. It's throbbing because there's really great circulation going to it, and circulation fixes every wound. So circulation is the key to really great wound care. So using ice is not what we recommend. If a burn does not heal in 3 to 5 days, I always recommend that you go and you get treated you see your local doctor, or you can call the burn center and you could very easily get added on. We see patients in about 48 hours. We've gotten so busy over the years that we used to say we'd see you within 24, but it's more along the lines of about 48 hours now.
Okay.
Really great question. Thank you for the reminder, because I totally spaced putting that slide in.
Thank you very much.
Other questions? I have a couple of people in here who introduced themselves to me who their kids work for me in the burn center. So I hope it was educational to you guys as well, to be able to have a little bit more insight into what they see on a daily basis. This did not show you the day-to-day intensive care of burn, but it showed you a little bit of the glamorous side, a little bit of burn care, what we really deal with on a day-to-day basis, and kind of a little bit about our system. So, yeah.
How do you guys take care of yourselves?
Oh, love that question. Self-care and resiliency these days is such a huge topic, because if you look at the EMS world, there's so many people that end up taking their lives from PTSD or the stress, and they don't have a good plan in place. I spend more time on resiliency now in the last 3 years as a manager than I ever did previous to that. I've always been worried about my staff. I always look out for that. I had people who were concerned about what that looked like for me as well, but we try to teach them. I bet I spend 20 minutes of every new employee interview now talking about how someone manages their stress, whether there's someone that can ask for help well, whether there's some opportunity they have to make themselves to manage their stress. So how do we do that? We have internal debriefings once a month. The university has an amazing employee assistance program where they actually can come in. You can get your own private appointment with them. It's covered by your being an employee, or you can go have one-on-one counseling, or you can actually have a debriefing, participate in talking about it. A lot of times I find the debriefings are almost better, because you get to hear that people know what's going on. I'm sure that both of these folks that are here that have employees that work for me, they know that their kids have had some really hard days in the burn center. It's emotionally challenging care, and you have to keep it in perspective. I fell in love and being able to do it for so long because I got to see people after their injuries. I fell in love with seeing them recover. So I try to get staff to those programs a lot. I try to make sure that they understand, they get to see what a survivor is capable of, because if you live in all the bad stuff every day, it's hard to find the good stuff. So we spend a lot of time talking about that. And the university, many of you may not know, but the School of Medicine building, the old building that's the original hospital, is getting ready to come down sometime in the next 3 to 5 years. They've been saying that forever, but it is going to come down. And when they do that, they're going to build a very nice, actual whole section that's nothing but dedicated to resiliency for medical staff, which I think is a really nice thing. And that's a very common thing throughout the United States these days, is resiliency training. So pretty important. We do really hard stuff. Yeah. And my mom knows that I've had a hard day too. So moms are good.
Okay, Brad, that was a great presentation.
Thanks so much.